Alright, hello guys, this is your Uncle Big Fish, and on this video I'm gonna be making a guide for the Paladin. Well, at least that's what I would like to call it. This is, the official name for this one is the Guardian, and this guide is gonna be for a water style Guardian. Now, before we get started, I just want to say that the videos now have all of the Dragoness related videos have already been updated to also be translated to Indonesian language and another 68 languages available currently. More languages will be available as time goes on, but for now that's all that I can render, and luckily YouTube has been very cooperative when it comes to all this. So thank you so much to YouTube, and I want to say thank you so much to the Indonesian people. I think that a lot of my viewers are from Indonesia, so huge perks there for you guys. So now we have Indonesian language, which is very good. For this one, I will be showing you a couple builds, and this one's gonna be from my mobile UI, so you guys can actually see this a lot more clearly, I would say, because most of you are playing on mobile, not on the emulator. So for this one, I'll be talking first about the skills and what it does, and I'm gonna talk about a couple sets and also how to actually play as a Guardian, the most effective way to play Guardian. Now for this one, we're gonna be talking about the skills first, and what does the skills do. So for the Cleric set, you don't want to level this thing up because it is not very useful. This thing gives you an added 5% into your damage dealt. However, you cannot stack this with another one. This is an upgraded version. This skill effect cannot be active at the same time as Miraculous Light, which is this one. So you can't have this one and also this one active at the same time. This one gives a 10% boost to your damage dealt, whilst this one only has 5. So you don't need to level this thing up. You can just leave it as is. Don't level it up. Don't waste your skill points. For this one, you do need this in some while. If you dodge roll right before an enemy uses a skill, you will have the lighting up indicator, and that will pretty much amplify your damage to basically 200% of your attack. So it increases the total damage output of what you have of your next skill. And this calculation actually is calculated after the damage dealt buffs and armor break. So you ideally want to have a damage dealt passive up or a buff up, and you want the enemy to have an armor break first so that the next hit will hurt more, because this is actually calculated at the very last part of the damage calculations. For the next one will be the next passive. This is going to be counter blow. When you're knocked to the ground, immediately get back up and counter blow. This counter blow does have very low damage, only 100%. However, it's okay, because this, what you want from this is actually the ability to immediately stand up when you get knocked. And this is actually very useful because not a lot of classes have this ability. So you're pretty much immune to getting knocked down once every 15 seconds. So this thing has a cooldown of 15 seconds. After you use this once and you get knocked down again, you can't use this again until 15 seconds after. So be sure to understand when you can actually use this. Next one will be aerial evasion. When sent flying, change your stance midair to land on your feet. This thing basically nullifies knockups, or when you're getting bashed by a huge monster and you fly up, you press your evasion button, it will cancel your falling down animation, and you will actually immediately just go back on your feet. And this basically disables you from getting staggered by a huge boss or some kind of classes like Moon Knight or the Destroyer from actually staggering you using a knockup skill. Next is going to be your buff skill or your ultimate skill. This is going to be Divine Metamorphosis, and this is the only viable one for the Guardian. Unfortunately, this one doesn't. And the reason for that is because this one has only Dark and Fire imbue element. So you don't get the bonuses from Fire and also Dark because you're a Guardian. And the Guardian is only pretty much viable to be either a Water type or a Holy type. So you always go for this one pretty much 10 out of 10 of the time. And honestly, in my opinion, this is somewhat better as well due to the ability of simply just having 8 seconds of pure iframe. So this is a very strong skill. It has pretty good damage. However, there is something I want to talk about here, and that's pretty much the scaling of the water type. If you see here, the water scaling of this skill is not on power, but actually on agility. So this is actually very funny, in a way that all of your other skills scale with strength or power. I'll call it strength from now on, because power seems kind of weird. This is every single skill that you have scales with power or strength. But for the water one, in particular, scales more from agi. So this enables you to pretty much go half-half on just power or agi, just simply for this damage. This amplifies the damage that you're currently dealing, and that's pretty much it. As for what it does, with the agi boost, it will just deal more damage. That's literally it. What does the elemental imbue does? Pretty much nothing, just increases the damage, and it actually applies more attributes, which are these 3 panels down there: strength, agi, and also the intelligence. It does get bonuses from all 3, however it scales most from agi. It gets 66% increase of bonus damage from agi, 33.04 from both power and intelligence. Next, let's talk about this one. Normal attack increases by 35%, so you basically get 35% extra damage on your normal attacks, which scales with final damage. So it's actually a stat that you want to level up if you want to start dealing more damage. It actually amplifies the final damage calculations as well. Next one will be Holy Light Blade. This is going to be pretty much your bread and butter skill. This thing is very powerful. This thing scales primarily on strength, and with the water imbue, you actually gain a shield that converts 7% of your max HP into a shield. You basically gain 7% of your max HP as a shield, and this thing can stack twice, giving you a total of 14% of your max HP as basically a shield that absorbs damage. And this allows you to actually get healed while the shield is blocking damage from being entered into your damage from your HP bar. So you actually have a shield that protects you while the priests or the saints behind are healing you. This is very, very strong. And be sure to spam this skill pretty much off cooldown. You kind of just want to keep an uptime of that shield, because it enables you to survive longer. It enables you to brush off damage, and this thing is very useful. However, for PvP, I would say this skill is not that good due to the awful tracking, and it simply just doesn't carry super armor, which is not as good, I would say. Unfortunately, it doesn't have super armor, so you are staggerable when you're equipping this. Ideally, for PvP, you might want to exchange this with something else that actually gives you some kind of super armor. You can go for Shield Rush, that's fine. However, if you want to equip this just to use it like on the sidelines, just for the shield, that's fine too. After all, this skill is pretty much only usable because of the passive added bonus from the water element. Without this, there's pretty much no reason to use this at all. However, for PvE, this skill is an absolute must. Without it, you are not really a guardian, because you're not as tanky without it. Next one will be the armor break. Now this is probably, in my opinion, the single best skill from the guardian itself. This skill is very useful for both PvP and PvE, because this skill pretty much increases the enemy's damage taken by 20%, which means that an enemy with armor break debuff takes 20% more damage from all sources, including from your friends. So if there's 4 of you, basically enemy will take 80% more damage per second from all 4 of you combined. This is very powerful, and with water element, you actually gain a wider area of effect. So this can potentially affect even 10 or 20 people if they're clumped up together. There is no... From what I can see, from all the testings that I have, this thing has absolutely 0 count limit. So as long as there's enemy in the vicinity, there's enemies on the circumference and the radius of the skill, everyone's gonna get affected. Every single one. This is very, very powerful. Next one will be Provoke. This Provoke is gonna be one of your most important skills alongside your armor break. This one taunts an enemy, and it pretty much makes you, well, the Guardian. Why is that? Because it enables you to force aggro into yourself, and it enables your DPS and your supports to actually be more safe from PVE monsters. However, this does not affect in PvP. Now, the good thing that I want to talk about this Provoke in PvP, although the taunt doesn't work, it gives you 30% boost to physical and magical defense. Now, this is extremely powerful because this makes you significantly more tanky than any other class combined. You can combine literally every single other class with damage reduction, and Guardian would still be much more tanky than all of them combined. And that's gonna be because this class have the ability to negate so much damage. And here I'm going to actually show you what it does with the water element. With water element, this gives you a dramatic defense bonus with skill use. This skill's area effect is increased. Now this is very strong. Now, one I want to talk about is going to be the Holy version. The one that says Holy says dramatic defense bonus with skill use, also reduction in any damage taken from enemies hit with a skill. In terms of usage for PvP, this is just simply better. Why? Because you actually gain 5% more damage reduction, whilst the water version pretty much gives you a bigger area of effect. That is pretty much the only difference. The water one has a bigger area, but the Holy one gives you 5% damage reduction. So that's something you can think about. Also, there's a couple differences between the water and also the Holy version. The Holy version scales with strength, while the Holy version scales with agi. So if you see the trend here, this class is very weird because it scales with both agi and strength, which is pretty damn funny. So if you go water element, you pretty much want to go full agi, because agi scales better with the rest of your skills compared to strength. If you want to go for strength build, you're going to be going for holy. So you can actually go for either an agi build or a strength build, and you'll be fine. However, I would say if you're going for a purely water build, you can go for agi. Agi scales way better. Also, for the rest of your skills that I want to be talking about, we will not be talking about the other sets because they are not water imbue, and this skill just sucks. Yeah, this skill is probably the worst, I would say. Divine Light Hammer, this thing has very low damage. I've seen how much the scaling goes. It's very bad damage. And also, for a skill that deals so little damage and has so little impact, having 15-second cooldown is simply not viable. So just forget about it. It's no good. Divine Punishment is also one of those skills that, in my opinion, doesn't really have a lot of use. It's got a very long cooldown, and honestly, it doesn't really deal as much damage as I thought. This thing does increase Holy Light Blade's damage by 10%. However, it has a very long cooldown, guys. 24-second cooldown. And it increases the damage of a skill that just naturally don't have a high base power, so it's not very useful. Like, an increase of 10% into Holy Light Blade is not enough to make it viable. That's why there's much better uses for this skill slot. This skill, in my opinion, is not that good, and I don't recommend you using it. This thing also, as you can see, scales with agi. Now, this one is a very circumstantial skill. This skill has very horrible tracking. Absolutely dog shit tracking. Absolutely horrible. However, this skill does have super armor, and it gives you very good mobility. So you might want to use this for PvP. This does also increase damage mitigation, so it gives you damage reduction. 5%. Very strong. Yeah? So I'll just read here what the skill does. Water Elemental Enhancement, which will gonna be, if you put Water Element on it, it's gonna reduce the cooldown of Holy Light Blade. So it enables you to spam the skill a lot more, because it has 2-second less cooldown. And also, this thing scales with another skill's passive. We'll talk about that later. Basically, you take less damage while you're using the skill, and it gives you basically 5% damage resistance. Very strong skill. However, very circumstantial, and the 5% damage reduction isn't actually that impressive once you think about it. So if a damage goes like 100, you're only going to be taking 95. But honestly, even that alone is not enough to make the skill viable. But if you absolutely just want the damage reduction and the mobility for PvP, I do recommend you maybe taking this thing off for PvP, changing it with this, because this thing does have super armor, so it's actually quite strong. Next one, we'll be talking about the other passive, which is Slight Spiral. After using Side Slip, you can add a hammer attack. Side Slip is going to be your dodge into a normal attack. So I'll just show you here what it looks like. We'll be going to... let's see. We can go pretty much anywhere. I'm going to be going to Lake Island. We're going to Lake Island here. So, now here, this is going to be Lake Island. I'm just going to get out here so I can show you what I'm talking about. So for this to work, you need to have the skill slot up. If you're walking and the skill slot goes like this, and your skills disappear, you need to press your attack button once to get everything out. Now what you're going to do is you're going to use your evasion once, and then you're going to normal attack, like so. Alright, that one's just an evasion. I haven't pressed the side slip. Side slip looks like this. Sorry about that. The thingy actually dropped, so I gotta attack once first. There you go. That is called the side slip. So you're gonna slide and then attack. This is pretty... I would say it's not actually that strong, but in some cases this enables you to actually deal somewhat a little bit more damage, so it could be useful in some occasions, but the cooldown is pretty long, so just be sure to know what you're doing, because this will be taking a bit of time. Yeah? The next skill after that is gonna deal more damage. The thing is, the skill set don't really say anything about hammer, and the ones that actually use hammer attacks that says hammer in the name doesn't really have good synergy with your class, because you're not really using Thor's hammer, and the rest of the other skills like Divine Hammer is not really that good. And if you see here, the really good ones, they don't have the name hammer on it. So yeah, this is very circumstantial, and in my opinion this is pretty weird because you don't really use it. So honestly, if you really want me to like just say like don't use the skill, or don't even like use it as a passive, I would say you do not really need it if you're a water build. I think you can make use of not having this at all, but just having it, and it's not really taking up a lot of skill points. And I thought, yeah, screw it, it's fine, just put it there. Maybe you could use it somewhat. So this thing only affects a couple skills with the word hammer on it. I would say this is more useful if you're a Crusader. If you're a Guardian, this is not very useful. But the side slip does give you that it gives you an iframe, only for about half a second. So it does have some uses, very niche uses. But essentially speaking, what you want to do is to side spiral into a Thor's hammer. That's if you're playing Crusader. That's pretty much the set. And that's about it. For the Guardian skill builds, you have this one, single player damage increased. If you're playing in Forgotten Ruins, the Forbidden Ruins, or you're doing just normal grinding, and you're not having any players nearby, this thing says non-player targets, no teammates nearby. So if you're playing solo, you will always deal 35% more damage to monsters. This is going to be at max level, which you can actually get later at level 60. Next one is going to be your main Guardian passive, which is going to be your class mastery. This thing reduces damage received by 10% passively. So without actually using any skills, you already have a passive 10% damage reduction. Super strong. And Provoke deals physical damage equal to 1 of your max HP. So this buffs the skill Provoke, which is going to be this one, your main skill, your bread and butter skill. And if you read here, Provoke deals physical damage equal to 1 of your max HP. I'll just say it outright. This explanation is very vague because I absolutely don't understand what this means. Deals physical damage equal to 1 of your max HP. So if it says 1, it doesn't really make sense. It's probably 1%. If it's 1%, it kind of makes sense. And that's pretty much why you can actually scale pretty well with increasing your max HP. In my opinion, this saying of 1% of your max HP is actually 1% instead of 1. So here, if you see how much my Provoke does, 14,000. And if you see here on the Sage skills, Provoke's damage is not that great. It's 126%. You do gain some bit more added bonus from your attributes because this is water imbued. However, this passive enables you to scale damage from max HP. So your max HP actually becomes a source of damage, which means that you can scale pretty good by investing some of your stats in your max HP. Finally, I want to talk about this one. This is going to be your buff skill for the Guardian. This skill, in my opinion, is very powerful if you know how to use it. So create a protective shield around your teammates within range. The range is very, very short. The range is only about where I'm standing here all the way to this end over here. So it's not very big. This grass patch over here all the way here, and it works like in a circular kind of pattern. So it just goes around you from where I'm standing here all the way to here. And I'll just walk around how big the area is. It's not very big, yeah? So make sure you are very close to your teammates when you're using the skill. Now, what is the usage of the skill Defending Stance? You can use this right before, if you're fighting layers and you know that a boss is about to do a perilous attack. What you can do is you can cast the skill to your frailer teammates, like say the Bowmans or the Tempests or a Windwalker or a Saint or anything that's very soft. You can get to them closer distance to that particular teammate and press the skill. This thing does affect everyone in the vicinity, but knowing that there's so little communication in the game, most people don't even know what your skill does. So don't overthink about it. Just try to save someone you expect is going to die or take a lot of damage from. The shield basically gives them 20% of that person's max HP as a shield. So this is actually very strong because this skill in most cases is more than capable of blocking and the entire damage of a perilous attack from a boss. Depending on how your teammate is, obviously. If they're too weak, then it'll probably just break through, but it will reduce significantly the amount of damage that they'll be taking. Next one's gonna be Justice Crash. Yeah, this is not gonna be. This thing does have the same name as that Movement Rider from One Punch Man series. However, this one isn't gonna be using a bicycle, but you're gonna be using your shield. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna leap in the air and then quickly dive downwards. Now this one has a very high damage scaling. It scales primarily on Agi, and it has super armor. Also, what's really powerful is this Justice Crash is so strong that this is actually one of your two main skills when it comes to damage output. What you're gonna do is, with Water Element, you have very high action speed. So you're gonna go like that. Very powerful. I'll show you the difference between a holy build and if you're using it without using the... If you're on holy, it looks different. Honestly, there's no difference between the animation for holy and not using anything, aside from the at least the action speed. They're pretty much the same. So if you're using the holy build or you're not equipping anything, this is gonna take a bit of time. You see that? It kind of pauses just for a split second. It pauses on the air. So that's actually something you don't want, because what will happen is it takes up time before damage is applied, so it's not very good. However, if you're going for a water build, it will increase the attack speed and enables it to come pretty much almost instantly, so you can actually use that for damage. And it's going to be one of your 2 skills that actually deal a lot of damage. Now the second one is going to be pretty much your highest damage skill, and also the skill that has the highest scaling with your water imbue. This is going to be your skill Destroy. This thing does have super armor, so you do still take damage while you are using this. However, this skill is very powerful because it has a very high radius and a very high damage. This skill pretty much have the highest damage scaling compared to every other skill you have. So you want to use this, and be sure to actually, well, think about using this more sparingly, because the cooldown is very long. It has a 25-second cooldown. Justice Crash has 30-second cooldown. So this thing has very long cooldown. You want to use it sparingly, and try to use it on a crowd. This thing has very high radius. I'll just show you here how far radius goes. You see there? This thing goes in like a spherical area. Very big AoE. It hurts. Gives you super armor. And there's also a niche bonus. It also reduces the cooldown of your Hoylite Blade, which means that you can spam your Hoylite Blade more often, so you always have more shield uptime. So it's very, very strong. This is going to be pretty much what the skill set is. It also increases movement speed, so it's actually quite strong, and you can use this as a means of escape, because after you use it, you'll be significantly faster. If you see there, my walking speed is faster. So that's pretty much it for the water build set. For the skills, this is going to be pretty much the skill set that you'll be going on most of the time if you're going solo. If you're going for a team-based one, and you think that your team needs more defensive approach, you can go and switch your Miraculous Light power to the defender stance, making it look somewhat like this. If you're going for if you think that the enemy is pretty easy, you just want to deal damage, you can just change it with the Miraculous Light power instead, going for a full DPS. Now I'm going to show you a clip of me fighting against a shadow from the 15th floor of the Red Moon. Now if you see here, what I would do every single time is I'm going to be using my buff, and I'm going to get close, and ideally I always want to get close first. I want to be in front, so that when my teammates arrive, the enemies are all aggroed onto me. And ideally what you want to do is you want to jump in with either Justice Crash or using Destroy. You want to use Provoke immediately, so you want to use Provoke first, and after that you're going to be using your ultimate. This will basically give you about 8 seconds of just pure iframe, while the PVE skills, the monsters are all attacking you, but at this time you're completely immune to damage. This is very powerful because it disables the enemy from actually dealing damage to you, and allows you to tank even through the most robust damage dealers. You can use this in PvP in terms of if you know that someone's high damage skills are still ready, then you can use this and block those damages. And by the time the skill's over, their main damage skills are all on cooldown. And this makes you more tanky. So pretty much being a guardian is mostly about knowing what skills you want to use first. You need to always be very sparing about using your skills, because if you don't, what's going to be a problem is you're going to have difficulty trying to actually deal damage or just be useful. Due to the fact that 2 of your skills have extremely long cooldown, you need to always know what you're supposed to do. For example, I want to deal damage, or I want my teammates to deal damage. Then you ideally want to start with your buff skill into an armor break. This will pretty much increase the damage output that your whole teammate does by effectively 55%. And the reason for that is, if you go to skill, and you see here on Sage, Power Blessing is going to be one of your skills, your buff skills, and this increases the damage dealt by 30% of everyone in your team. So everyone does 30% more damage, and this scales with every single thing you have. and every single debuff that they have. So if say you're going with a sniper or some other class that just makes them hit harder, this will amplify that by 30% as well. And this thing also gets amplified by armor break, because armor break makes them take 20% more damage, and power blessing gives your allies 30% more damage. So it's actually very powerful synergy in terms of weakening the enemy, making them softer, and making your allies hit harder. This thing does have a very long cooldown, 1 minute. So please use it only when you think that your allies all have their ultimates ready or their damage skills up. Because if you use this when your allies don't have any more DPS skills, it's going to be a huge waste. Next, this is going to be pretty much the skill set for PVE, and you'll be going for this route pretty much almost all the time. If you're going for a teammate and you are going for layers, you want to change your Miraculous Light to the defender stance, like so, making you pretty much you deal less damage, but you make your allies and everyone else simply more tanky. It saves their lives and it makes them hit harder. So you're playing for a more tanky support build. This is pretty much the most ideal way to play the Guardian. Now I want to talk about a couple things or damage rotations that could be very strong. Now, if you're going to say activity, this is probably one of the worst things for a Guardian, is actually dealing damage. Your class just don't scale as much in terms of damage compared to other classes. So you always want to be able to have the right synergy between your skills to deal the most damage possible. Say like this, I'm going for a raid. This is pretty much the furthest I can push it through, because going further is just simply way too hard. If you see here, recommended battle power is 66,000. I'm currently at 70,000, but it's still near impossible for me to actually kill the boss. And the reason for that is quite simple. For a lot of the Guardian players out there, I just want to say that this is not your fault. It's simply that our class, the Guardian, have extremely bad damage scaling. Our damage is very low because we don't scale as well as other DPS classes when it comes to dealing damage. Most of our class's ability is mostly focused on being tanky and reducing damage. So this is not entirely our fault. However, there's some things that you can do to make things better, and that is to actually focus on how to amplify the most damage possible. Ideally, if you want to start everything, you always want to start with your armor break, because this thing will always amplify the rest of your skills for 8 seconds. But before that, you want to use your buff first. So say, like the battle starting, I'm going to using this, which is my Miraculous Light, and then I'm going to use the Power Blessing. I'm going to get close to the enemy, I'm going to use the armor break, and then I'm going to spam the 3 highest damage skills that I have. And this is the sequence that you want to do this on. First, you're going to be using your ultimate, and then you're going to be using your Justice Crash, and then you're going to be using your Destroy. Destroy will always go last. Why? Because Destroy actually have a long ass, it's got a very long wind up, and the wind up buys time for its cooldown. So by that same logic, it's buying off time for the Justice Crash, which has longer cooldown, 30 seconds. So with this rotation, you will actually deal more damage. Also, if you want to be just min-maxing your damage, you can go like this. After your ultimate, you're gonna use your Justice Crash, and then you're gonna use your Holy Light Blade, and then you're gonna be using Destroy, and then by just waiting a little bit, you'll have Holy Light Blade ready as well, because the Destroy actually reduces the cooldown of your Holy Light Blade, and within seconds you can deal very high damage. This is pretty much the only way to play the Guardian, in my opinion, because this class just simply have difficulty trying to compete when it comes to damage output, and you do need a lot of CP or battle power to make this class work. It's very difficult to use, and I absolutely don't recommend this class for a newer player, because you do need a lot of CP advantage to actually stay relevant. The thing that I would say is the Guardian is a very fun class. I think that this class has a lot of potential. It's a very useful team. It's a very useful class for a team. It has a particular role that's near impossible to replace. Unlike DPS, in which you have a lot of choices, this class fills the role of pretty much similar to Saint. And that's the fact that you're pretty much irreplaceable. Because, like Saint, DPS classes can't tank damage. They can't heal. And you play that role. So that's pretty much it for this Guardian guide. I hope that you guys learned something new today. If you have any questions, or you have some builds that you want me to do next, or if you have something to add, things I haven't included in this video, please let me know in the comment section down below. This is your Uncle Big Fish, and that is all I have for you guys today. Bye.